Oh, mother, I can feel the soul falling over my head. And as I climb into an empty bed, oh well, enough said. I know it's over, still I cling. I don't know where else I can go.
I saw the newspaper on Saturday in the newsagents. I tend not to take a full range of newspapers at the weekend. I like to have a little bit of time off, but I had to do a double take at the front page of the Daily Mail because it either had an astonishing story about Keir Starmer or it was recycling a non-story that I already knew about. And I know they've changed editor and Paul Dacre is back in the building, the man who brought you Enemies of the People, Crush the Saboteurs, or Remainer Universities, a man whose understanding of British values apparently involves attacks upon our sovereign parliament, attacks upon the judiciary, attacks upon academic freedom. But hey-ho, I'm sure he's got a lot of flags. And I picked it up. I had a look at it in the newsagent because I thought, what are they doing? And of course, then the penny dropped. It's so transparent, so desperate, and so clearly in service of the Prime Minister. They've already got their reward with announcements over the weekend about what might happen at the Beeb. They've already got their reward for slavish support for Boris Johnson because, to put it loosely, Rupert Murdoch isn't rich enough and Viscount Rothermere doesn't yet exercise enough influence over the body politic. So these are the twin missions. Although we'll get on to Murdoch in a minute because that's quite interesting as well. So this story that Keir Starmer's been forced to talk about all weekend, and I don't know whether it reflects badly or well upon the British media that they have forced him to talk about it all weekend. The story, I don't know if you're aware of this, the story was published in The Sun in May of 2021. May of 2021. It was 8 months. It was published. It wasn't just like floated and then thrown away. I think it even came up at PMQs, didn't it? It's quite incredible to me. And I thought I'd reached a point where nothing could shock me anymore about the absurdities of the right-wing press, the Daily Mail in particular. I honestly thought nothing could shock me anymore. And Saturday didn't shock me. Saturday just made me go, oh my days. This is pathetic. And then you have that really unpleasant thought, which is, I think, probably condescending, but I can only remind you of what George Carlin had to say about stupid people. Think of the average person and remember that half the world is even stupider than that. So the calculation is, they're not going to fall for this, boss. The story's 8 months old, boss. The story's 8 months old. They're not going to pretend that this is somehow comparable to the cavalcade of partying that's been unfolding at Downing Street, right up to and including the two that they threw the night before Prince Philip's funeral. They're not that stupid. Our readers aren't that stupid. And at some point in the editorial conversation, somebody senior turns around and sort of puts their little finger to the corner of their mouth or twirls their moustaches and says, I think you'll find they are. They'll do whatever I jolly well tell them to do. So the order came out on Saturday. Please pretend that Keir Starmer has done something in any way remotely comparable to Boris Johnson and his entire staff at 10 Downing Street. And then you could almost muster up some sympathy for Nadeem Zahawi and others this morning who were forced to go along with it. Nadeem Zahawi is an intelligent man. He's also, I am told, by people who know more about these matters than I do, really made his presence felt at the Department for Education in a very positive way. We are unlikely to see any repeats of the debacles over which Gavin Williamson presided. Gavin Williamson also in the news this weekend. I'm not joking. This is true. Apparently he's in line for a knighthood. Many speculate that it's because he knows where even more bodies are buried regarding Boris Johnson with regards to his time as Chief Whip, of course. But yes, it will be Sir Gavin Williamson for services to public idiocy, which very few people could argue he hadn't achieved on an epic scale. So you have this conversation which involves them saying we're going to pretend that there is a sort of case to answer. And then you pick me up occasionally getting frustrated with callers who have fallen for the they're all as bad as each other line. You remember we had one last week, and I had to point out that he would buy a second-hand car off Keir Starmer or me, but he wouldn't buy a second-hand car off Boris Johnson. If you just think of why that is, you realise they're not all the same. So I wasn't shocked on Saturday, and I don't like opening the programme every day by referring to what the Ministry for Daily Mail is doing, but some days I think you have to, and it was fairly desperate because the story was 8 months old and it didn't matter when it first came out because he didn't break any rules. He was at work and he had some dinner which involved a beer. I imagine, looking back, he wishes, or rather if he'd known there was a camera there, knowing how the British media works, the right-wing media works, he probably would have had a Dr. Pepper or a glass of water. But hey-ho, that ship sailed in May of 2021. And then, like the Titanic, they tried to raise it on Saturday. But I wasn't shocked on Saturday. Nor am I shocked to see on social media a few people, a relatively small number of people, pretending to believe that there's a case to answer or some sort of comparison to be drawn. But then I came into work this morning, and I kid you not, if I were a cartoon character, I would have been absolutely textbook double take. I what I do is I come into work, I put my coffee down on the desk, and then there's a little hat stand about 4 yards to the left. So I put my coffee down on the desk. The papers are in a little neat pile in front of me, unless Theo Usherwood's got his grubby mitts on them, in which case they look like they've been used as a litter tray. So the newspapers are in front of me in a nice neat pile, often because, people like to tease me, often with the Daily Mail on top, and then I go and hang my coat up. So I glance at the. Are you picturing this? This is why the radio is better than television. This is the kind of imagery. These are the pictures that you tune in for every day. So I glanced, and I was looking quite smart this morning as well because I was in Morrison's at the weekend, and I bought one of those, those little bargain things, one of those de-fluffers. The roller things. There's a lint roller, yeah. I bought one of those with 3 spare rolls. So I did my coat this morning. It was looking a bit linty. So I was looking I felt I was looking quite dapper. So I come in a bit like Woodward and Bernstein. I put my coffee down on the desk and head towards the hat stand, shrugging off my 50% cashmere overcoat, which has been freshly delinted, and I hand it up. Of course, it's not 50%, Keith, 100% all the way. But you got to keep the image. And I actually double back. I'm halfway through a pace towards the hat stand, and I do a sort of pivot and come back again because I presumed that someone had put Saturday's Daily Mail on the front page on my desk by accident, because the front page was exactly the same. It was the same picture. And if it was desperate on Saturday to try to turn this into a story about Keir Starmer, could you imagine, seriously, if you didn't know this was true, because you've heard Nick talking about it and you've heard Keir Starmer being asked about it. If I came into work this morning and said to you, well, I think we can all agree that Keir Starmer has got some questions to answer, hasn't he, after the events of the last few days? How many parties have there been in Downing Street? Is anyone keeping count? More emerging at the weekend. One, I think, where he gave a speech, another leaving speech, still reeling from the news that they were dancing and carousing to such a robust degree that little Wilfred's swing got broken in the Downing Street garden. Party after party after party, claim, debacle, criticism. You've got Tory MPs, even Andrew Bridgen, who we never came up with a nickname for. I'm going to call him Andrew Irish Passport Bridgen. Andrew Irish Passport Bridgen sent in a letter of no confidence last week. So after that, and if I said to you, imagine if I sat down this morning and said to you, well, after the last 2 weeks of scandal emerging from the very heart of Boris Johnson's government, I think we can all agree that Keir Starmer has some serious questions to answer this morning. But, ladies and gentlemen, here is the opening paragraph of the Daily Mail's front page story today. Sir Keir Starmer was last night under mounting pressure to apologise. So, what? Who else needs... Sir Keir Starmer was last night under mounting pressure to apologise. Boris Johnson's crack team of advisers and assistants were partying as the Queen was preparing to mourn her dead husband in isolation within the Abbey. But Sir Keir Starmer was last night... Do you ever have a moment where you just think, hang on, look, I mean, I don't like those lefties. That woke business is really getting to me. I'm not going to pressure you this morning to explain what you mean by either of those words. Today's not the day. But do you ever have a moment where you think, hang on a minute, how can anybody, let alone what I think is still the best-selling newspaper in the country, how can anybody look at the events of the last couple of weeks, Prime Minister's still in hiding, and conclude that the person who's got questions to answer is Keir Starmer? I genuinely reeled in shock at the idea that they've gone with the same story 2 out of 3 days. I don't know what was on the front of the Mail on Sunday yesterday. There are some services I'm not prepared to undertake on your behalf, and reading that nonsense, I'm afraid, at the moment is one of them. But my goodness me, the suggestions I make to you occasionally about how desperate our newspaper industry is now in this country, how ludicrous the stranglehold exercised by Rupert Murdoch and the Barclay family and the Daily Mail, and you think I exaggerate, or you think I don't blame you, goodness me. But my goodness, this has got to be a morning on which you just go, what the hell has happened to us? Freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, war is peace. Sir Keir Starmer has questions to answer. Sir Keir Starmer was last night under mounting pressure to apologise. Unbelievable, isn't it? Except, of course, it's not. And it speaks of a level of desperation that I don't remember seeing before in British newspapers. I wasn't old enough, really, to be following Margaret Thatcher's final days. I was old enough to be following them, but I wasn't doing it for a living. And I had, more important things to be getting on with. I was actually clearing out the stockroom at River Island in Worcester on the day that Margaret Thatcher's departure from high office was confirmed. So I don't remember ever it being quite like this. And what that does, of course, if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, this speaks of a belief in the propaganda arm of Team Boris Johnson, i.e. the Daily Mail. They are absolutely frit. They are terrified. They are absolutely desperate now to try to make this scandal go away. Listen, this isn't an opinion. This is just objective. You do not put on your front page twice an 8-month-old story that was in the Sun anyway in May of 2021 unless you are absolutely terrified of something. So what are they terrified of? I'll tell you what they're terrified of. They are terrified of you. They are terrified, these people who did more to portray Boris Johnson as some sort of Churchillian figure, while tiny little voices in the media like mine were telling you the truth about him. They are terrified that you're about to wise up to the scale of the con that they sold you. I don't think we'll bring Brexit into it today. Obviously, if the salesman is revealed to be a massive fraud, then the last thing you bought off him is something you're going to be checking your receipts for. But that is still a way off. But these people, this newspaper, told you Boris Johnson was a sort of cross between the Messiah and Winston Churchill. And a lot of people believed him, particularly in that so-called Red Wall area. So they are now terrified. I mean, what do they hold valuable? What do they care for, if not the Queen? They're terrified now of you. They're terrified that you're going to see through the web of nonsense that they've been spinning furiously since 2016. And what I want to know at 10:16 on this brisk Monday morning, what I want to know is whether or not you're waiting for Sue Gray's report. That's a clever conflation, isn't it? Here's another irony. Remember all those MPs who told you that we had to take back control and get rid of unelected bureaucrats? Well, you're in control now, lads. So why on earth are you abnegating your responsibility to do your democratic duty to an unelected bureaucrat called Sue Gray? You've taken back control, mate. Come on. At least Andrew, Irish passport Bridgen, recognises the importance of his role. All these other MPs queuing up to say, well, I shall wait until soon. You know what happened. You've got the facts. They haven't even been denied. If he hadn't done anything wrong, what's he flipping apologising for? But you're waiting for the unelected bureaucrat to report back before you'll decide what you're going to do. How does that work? It's almost as hilarious as Nigel Farage complaining about the immigration rules exercised by Australia. So anyway, we need to get to a question. I can tell that by the look on Keith's face. 17 minutes after 10 is the time. Here's your question. Is he done for? Genuinely, is he done for now? And I'm going to be a little bit cocky. I got no beef with you this morning, particularly. All is well in the O'Brien universe. I am, however, going to confine the earlier calls to the programme to people who voted Conservative in 2019, because there's not much point me asking anybody else whether or not Boris Johnson is done for. If like me, for example, you've pretty much had his measure now for the best part of a decade, fell for it. I make this point frequently. It's important so that you don't think I'm sneering at you. I fell for the Johnson Act in 2008 in London. Didn't take me long to see through it, but I fell for it. If you voted for it in 2019, and you may not have even fallen for the Johnson Act, you just may have found the alternative even less palatable, or you may have still been tied up in the B-word business. If you voted for him, his party, in 2019, I'd love to know whether you think he's done for. And just in case there's any doubt at all, I would also love to talk to you if you don't think genuinely don't think he is. And that he will bounce back. Because I'll tell you what, he's bounced back before, but he's never bounced back this far. And I've never seen such naked desperation on the front page of the Daily Mail, not once but twice in 3 days. That, more than anything else, makes me wonder whether his number's very nearly up. What do you think? And again, I know it isolates and excludes a lot of people listening, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to call in a little later in the programme. But if you voted Conservative in 2019, do you think Boris Johnson is done for? If so, why? If not, why not? And this from Kathy. Says, James, if Boris Johnson had broken into your grand's house and stolen all her money and jewellery, the Daily Mail would have a photo of Sir Keir Starmer finding £1 on the floor and putting it in his pocket on their front page the next day. You're not wrong, Kathy. But does the Daily Mail's desperation speak of a dead man walking? And they're sort of attempting to do a Lazarus by printing not once but twice in 3 days a front page story that was in the Sun 8 months ago. Peter is in Bedale. Peter, what have you got?
I think he will go.
Yes.
I wouldn't raise your hopes for it being immediately after the Sue Gray
I have
report.
no hopes. I have no hopes.
The pity.
No, I have no hopes one way or the other, actually. I imagine, and I haven't spoken to him about this, but I imagine people in the Labour High Command would probably at the moment rather fight a general election against Boris Johnson than anyone else. So I don't know that way. Just to clarify, did you vote? You're only allowed to ring me if you voted for them in 2019.
Well, I'm a Conservative Party member. I was actually campaigning, getting the vote out.
There we go.
In Darlington on the day of the general election in the pouring rain.
Fantastic.
Because Darlington had never had a Conservative MP.
That's right.
And I've campaigned a lot generally I campaign in Labour safe seats. And I can evidence this, but when you look at the way in which seats that are safe seats, and certainly the ones I looked at, get taken for granted.
Yes.
And Darlington had been taken for granted by the previous Labour MPs. And Peter Gibson, who got elected, has done, and he won't thank me for mentioning his name, but he's done great things there.
Why
He's
not?
got a lot of money come into the place. That is dependent upon his support for the government process. And so there's this, in the red wall seats, the MPs are now stuck a little bit because no matter how they feel, the reality is that they cannot step away from the core messages because that will stop the money that is heading in the direction of their constituents who need it arriving there.
I read one of them. I read one saying that in the campaign, no one had ever heard of him. And everyone on the doorstep told him they were voting for, and I'll use the Christian name for context, they were voting for Boris. But now, having been back to them, this was in one of the papers yesterday, now it's as if he's being told that they're very pleased with what he's done. It may even be your man, Peter Gibson. They're very pleased with what he's done as a constituents MP. He's put his name on the map, but they have completely fallen out of love with Boris Johnson. So it's like a reversal of roles from being an unknown who needed Boris Johnson's name on the ticket to being a warmly thought of constituency MP who could end up being out on his ear because Boris Johnson's name is on the ticket. Well,
Peter would certainly fit the description you've given because he these people work very hard and they're being so let down. This is why I almost have to pull over occasionally because I'm beating my hands on the steering wheel so hard.
I'm sure.
At times because, these people in Number 10, the way they have behaved makes it embarrassing.
Yes.
For people who support the Conservative policies and the Conservative government in general. And we'd quite like to get back to being, the sensible party.
Yeah. That's the idea. That's the tradition, isn't it? That the Labour can't be trusted with the national finances or whatever it might be. It may not be evidentially true, but it is it is successful and effective rhetoric. And now you've got this. So what would you do then? Because you wouldn't want to be knocking on doors briefly, because I've got loads of people waiting, and I don't get to speak to this many Tories very often.
I will not be campaigning in the May elections.
You won't be.
I've already made that very clear. No, it's.
Will you be voting? Will you be voting?
Well, I live in a very safe Conservative area,
sure,
and my local candidate is a guy I know very well.
Okay.
And he's a good chap.
Yes.
So, no brain cells required to vote for him.
But they've lost your shoe leather. Boris Johnson has personally lost your shoe leather.
And the interesting thing from Southend West will be turnout.
Yes.
Because Anna Firth is standing as the only candidate, because the other parties quite properly...
This is Sir David Amos's old constituency, which you're right, the other major candidates, some of the nasty parties are still putting up candidates, but you're right. And turnout, we are told, I'm sure you've been reading the same reports that I've been reading, Peter, there is a very real possibility that turnout will be spectacularly low. Even though it is an essentially uncontested by-election. Peter, thank you. It's a lovely way to kick things off. Darren is in Bracknell. Darren, what do you reckon?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
lovely to speak to you.
Likewise.
They've lost my vote.
Have they?
I've been a Conservative voter.
They or he? They or he?
They.
Well, no, because they might get your vote back, is what I'm positing.
Boris Johnson has just made me feel as though I'm a fool.
Yeah.
I've been taken for a fool. There's reasons that I voted for them in the last election that just seem to be I'm being made to feel as though my judgment was incorrect. And I think it's time personally for me for a change in the way I vote politically.
What broke it? What was the turning point?
I when Boris came up for election, he wasn't my favoured politician, but I just thought that he brought a bit of fresh air.
Yes.
In his style.
He is refreshing. I mean, definitely.
Yeah, it's very refreshing. But I just feel as though he's just been constantly found out about things now. I feel as though that the way he treats me as a Conservative voter, I just with a. Well,
let me tell you, I'm sure you know already, the calculation this week is that you will be brought back into the fold by announcements regarding attacks upon the Beeb, I guess Royal Navy ships, so whether it's gunboats or not, I don't know, being sent into the Channel to do something to migrants in flimsy dinghies, and hopefully we'll see the lifting of some of the other COVID rules, which you will be told is proof that he got everything right all along since the beginning of March 2020. So we know what the plan is. It's a three-pronged plan, and they calculate, will fall for it. And dare I add again.
Well, I've now joined the Labour Party as a member, a fully paid up member. I've got the local councillor coming round at lunchtime, and I've got some questions that I want to put to him. I think I've made my decision.
It looks like it. Blimey, I'm glad I hung on. Keith's not happy because we're late for the news, but we got the punchline, as it were, at the end of the call. I have a preponderance of men ringing into the programme, which is great. And I've only got one phone line free anyway, but it would be nice if a woman were to grab it. The question is fairly straightforward. Do you think he's done for? And the question, oddly, is informed by the front page of the Daily Mail, not so much on Saturday, which was just desperate, recycling an 8-month-old non-story about Keir Starmer having a beer with his tea when he was working in a constituency office up north. But they did it again today, and that speaks to me of a level of desperation I can't remember seeing in recent times. And I follow these things quite closely. I've done Carol a disservice. Carol's up after Peter. But anyway, there is still a preponderance of men on my switchboard, or a shortage of women, depending on which way you want to dice it. So if you can do something about that by grabbing the remaining phone line, 0345 6060 973, is the number that you need. Peter is in Windsor. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Good. So I've always voted Tory all my life, and I voted for Boris. But I think this is a different kind of scandal, whereby I feel, and I don't know if I speak for a lot of other people, where they just feel they've been cheated on.
Yes.
And I think once
Darren very much gave that impression. The last call before the news, didn't he? That if they're taking it quite personally, almost.
Yeah, and I think once you have been cheated on, you can move on, but you just never forget. And I think that's the way the country, feels at the moment. And they can keep coming out with things to save Boris.
Yes.
But once you're cheated on, once a cheater, always a cheater. And I don't think he can ever come back.
No, and obviously everyone, including yourself, will be well aware that he has a long and incredibly well-established reputation for cheating in every area of his life. So I suppose I should ask you, what made you think that this time would be different?
Well, I think it wasn't a pandemic. It wasn't a pandemic, and the country almost on a war footing. I don't think it would be such a scandal.
No.
But I think that the fact that he's almost cheated on the whole country as one, it comes across really, really bad. It's almost like, I don't know if I grew up in the 70s.
Yeah, same.
When, I don't get angry at the television a lot, but
sure.
There was a story in the 70s when people were throwing bricks through the television because they saw the Sex Pistols and they were so outraged by it.
Yeah.
I kind of get the same feeling when you get one of these government ministers on the TV.
Gosh,
If that makes any sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I don't know. Maybe I'm not angry enough. That's not a self-reflection that I often indulge in. But I almost feel sorry for some of them. I don't know whether that makes me a bit of a mug, because obviously they do have a sort of choice in what they come out and do. But Nadeem Zahawi in particular this morning, I just felt how demeaned he was by having to come out and pretend that the Keir Starmer story is even worthy of mention. Is Sky News here saying Sir Keir Starmer said he did nothing wrong after photo emerges of him drinking beer with staff during lockdown. Photo emerges. It was in the paper in May of 2021. What's your definition of emerges? It's just incredible, the language that's used.
If you work for somebody, even in a private life or in a company, who you know is never going to sack you, no matter what you do, why would you vote to get rid of him?
Yeah, there's something in
got a
there.
job for life.
I guess so. What will tempt you back? Because I was a bit shocked to hear that Darren has actually joined the Labour Party, having been, like you, a lifelong Conservative. What will tempt you back into the Tory fold?
Well, I can only hope that it's almost as if they're all annoying together as one bunch. They'd all have to go. There'd have to be a massive clear out. Forget the clear out of number 10. The
scapegoats,
civil servant, the scapegoats. You get rid of a lot of them. That's the only reason I've come back.
Interesting. Thank you, Peter. 10:38 is the time. Carol is in Rugby. Carol, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. What I'd like to say is I've voted Conservative all of my life.
Yes.
And as far as I'm concerned, Boris has lost it big time. I won't be voting Conservative again, purely because I feel that the current government have shown nothing but contempt to the people in this country, and I have never been so angry about anything. And during lockdown, I had to refrain from seeing my daughter, who was going through chemotherapy. And like many other people, we gave up things, made sacrifices, stayed at home. And it's not so much the fact that there was a gathering, it's the fact that
13 gatherings, I think. I'm struggling to keep count. I'm not being glib. I may have got the number wrong.
It's a culture. It's a culture of them and us. It's a culture of contempt. And, frankly, I think most of the parties actually have had incidents where contempt's been shown, even in Sage. But this one, I can only judge on my own views and feelings. And the only way I would vote Conservative again is probably if the whole lot were cleared out. And I think probably we need a change.
Do you think then that he has tainted everybody in his high command?
I think he absolutely has, because you can't defend the indefensible. And when people come out and try to make excuses and apologies, it just almost validates the behaviour. And as far as I'm concerned,
they're telling you you're stupid for care. So Nadeem Zahawi, who I have a horrible habit, Carol, I don't know if you've noticed, whenever I say warm things about a Conservative minister, something terrible happens in the coming days, whether it's sort of Matt Hancock turning out to be having an affair or Michael Gove turning out to be Michael Gove. But I quite like the cut of Nadeem Zahawi's jib, and there's something I think today quite poignant about seeing him trying to defend the indefensible, but you see it as him essentially saying you're stupid for caring so much.
I don't know whether I think they
sorry,
probably,
I think I put words in your mouth. I didn't mean to.
Well, I don't know if stupid's the word. I just think a chap on earlier, I can't remember his name, said, you can probably get past a lot of things.
Yes.
I could get past mistakes, etc. But this is a behaviour that is absolutely disgusting, and I don't want to be any part of it. So as far as I'm concerned, and as I say, I've voted in every election for many, many years. It's not the party I want to be associated
Something's
with
broken,
right
hasn't it? Something's broken. And listen, this is a radio phone-in show, and the plural of anecdote is never data, but I'm struck so far, Carol, by all the callers having taken this very personally, and that's what makes it different from previous political moments, I think.
I think everybody in this country reading about this behaviour has to take it personally, because it is just contempt on the people in this country. I can't speak for other people, but that's how I feel.
No, and I don't think it's over, for what it's worth. I just have a sense that there is more to come, and that Dominic Cummings in particular is keeping some of his grenades in reserve. Do you know what sparple means, Carol?
Yes.
No, you don't. Sparple?
Sparkle?
No, sparple.
Oh, no.
No, nor did I this morning, but I follow Susie Dent on Twitter. You know Susie off Countdown, and she's the mistress of the dictionary. To sparple is to deflect unwanted attention from one thing by making a big deal out of another. It's a 14th century word. I think it rather aptly describes what's going on in some of the newspapers at the moment. They are sparpling, Carol, and we shouldn't put up with it.
Well, if he had 1 ounce of integrity, 1 little ounce of integrity, he would have resigned immediately. That's what politicians historically do when they've done something so heinous. And as far as I'm concerned, it's very upsetting. I mean, I have to be honest, James, I'm not particularly a fan of your show.
We were getting on so well. Stop sparpling. Sparpling.
No.
Carry on. I can take it.
I'm open-minded and I listen. I don't agree with everything you say.
No, that would be boring.
But such is my anger this morning that I feel I wanted to phone in and just say, I don't want to be a part of it.
Fair enough. And I shall endeavour to win more warm feelings from you, Carol, in the days to come. Thank you for that. And I'm not making light of your contribution at all. It is clearly something that people are feeling on a personal level, and that transcends tribe or party. It's a personal affront, a personal offence that people are feeling. And I guess that is the hardest thing to diffuse, and perhaps that is some grounds for accusing me of being an absolute idiot when I feel sorry for Nadeem Zahawi. That's probably not quite the right word, but it's just grim to watch people prostrating themselves for Boris Johnson when we know how he treats people in his life, including people that he should be owing a lot more to than the likes of Nadeem Zahawi. The funeral officer who rang in on Friday, Cam, that story touched a lot of people. I think Wes Streeting brought it up on the telly yesterday, that idea of beating yourself up because you obeyed the rules when the people that introduced the rules ignored them. That I think is probably the best illustration actually of the personal nature of the reaction to this political moment, and it doesn't normally feel like that. There is plenty of time and plenty of room for you to, I don't know whether you're going to mount a spirited defence of Boris Johnson or a claim that he's done nothing wrong. Boris Johnson is doing that himself, apparently, from whatever bunker it is that he's hiding in at the moment. He's claiming none of this is his fault. He's been terribly let down by the people around him. But if you do want to make a case for him not being toast politically, or the callers that we've had so far overreacting or perhaps reacting prematurely, then, respectfully, we can do that, can't we? I'm sure we can get that view on the board as well, because at the moment it's close to consensus. We wonder whether Boris Johnson can come back from this continuing cavalcade of scandal, and of course whether or not he can come back from wherever he is another question entirely. He's off the radar. It's worth focusing on this, I think, briefly. It's also worth reflecting on the fact that I think just to go back to the Sparple, the weapons-grade Sparple of the moment, which is an astonishing attempt, and it really is only the Daily Mail. Even Murdoch has considered this to be perhaps a step too far. That Keir Starmer, being reported in May of 2021 to have had a beer with his dinner while working in a constituency office in the northeast of England, is somehow comparable to Boris Johnson's high command throwing parties with somebody DJing on the night before Prince Philip's funeral, or indeed the at least two parties that he attended, although, of course, he didn't realise they were parties. He thought they were work events. I think this is from the relevant legislation. Exception 20, so this is paragraph 29, clause C. Exception 20 is that the gathering is reasonably necessary for the purposes of campaigning in an election or a referendum held in accordance with the provision made by or under an act. So that was clearly true, because the by-election was just days away. And then exception 3, so this would be paragraph 6, clause A. An exception is that the gathering is reasonably necessary for work purposes or for the provision of voluntary or charitable services. So the argument that he was somehow in breach of bubble-based legislation or similar is spurious. I think people making that argument are doing so in good faith, but they're wrong. 10:51 is the time. Sarah is in Portsmouth. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, thank you for having me on your show. I actually
welcome.
spoke to you when I returned from Iraq,
Yes.
talking about vaccinations, so it's nice to speak to you again.
Likewise.
I think the thing I want to start off with really is disappointment. I myself looked at the dates of when all of these alleged parties had happened on both sides, whether that be from Keir Starmer or from Boris Johnson himself.
No, I don't think anyone's alleging that Keir Starmer had a party.
Well, no, quite, but it's still in breach of perhaps COVID regulations.
Well, no, it categorically isn't. No one's claiming it's in breach of COVID regulations.
Well,
if they are, they're wrong.
Well, nevertheless...
Yes, but it's important to be clear on this, because we don't want to do any sparpling.
No, quite. But, even still, these dates happened around the time that I was supposed to be returning home. Ordinarily we get something called R&R, so we can come back home. There I am, out there for 9 straight months because I'm not allowed to return home whilst he's having a party.
Yes.
Now, I spoke to your research. I've been a lifelong, Conservative voter. I don't foresee myself, switching sides. I don't think anything drastic like that would be beneficial to me, but I don't think I could ever vote for him.
Right.
Bearing in mind that I've lived in London for most of my life, and I saw how amazing he was as a mayor. And actually, that's one of the most foremost reasons why I actually voted for him.
What was your favourite bit of his mayoralty?
I think it was just the policies around the transport. I mean, I think that Sadiq Khan has done an awful job with
which policies around the transport? Sorry I'm just intrigued because I was covering it at the time, and I've never heard anyone use the word amazing before. What was your favourite policy?
Well, not allowing the ultra-low emission zones, and at the time the LEZs to come into foremost. I mean...
But that wasn't a policy, that was just an absence. So you can't say... what I really liked about him was the fact that
he rejected it. He rejected it. He rejected the low emission zones.
No, that's fine. I mean, you know, we know that the coroner has found at least one child has died as a result of the pollution on the roads in London, but I guess we all take our amazement where we find it, Sarah.
Yeah, but, you know, I'm disappointed. And for me, you know, it's not just the fact that we feel cheated as a society. I think it is just the lack of reality. You know, it's almost like he's living in a complete bubble where he thinks that no one sees what he's doing.
But remember that when he was having that affair with Jennifer Arcuri, he told you he was having technology lessons, and presumably you believed him.
Well, no, quite. But
that was amazing.
For me, he comes across like he's a narcissist, and you know, it's something that I hadn't really seen when he was there.
Enough.
You know, he's so flamboyant.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
You know, I think it's probably transversed into pure narcissism now that he's turned into a prime minister, and it's just not healthy for us. You know, there's plenty of candidates that could replace him that I think would be good.
Just out of interest, who do you fancy? Who do you like for it? Who could you see?
Chancellor.
Do you like Rishi Sunak still?
Yeah, I do. He's kept himself to himself. You know, I think Priti Patel is too authoritarian for Labour or any kind of, you know, people that wanted to vote Conservative, but they weren't sure. I think that would be too much of a...
I think she's also a bit crackers as well. That probably doesn't help. Whereas Rishi Sunak... Well, yeah, but in a different kind of way. So you don't feel... Because I thought there'd be more callers like you today, Sarah. I mean, it shows what I know. But I thought there'd be more... But I'm surprised by how many people have said they want to see a complete clear-out rather than just a...
I don't see the point, you know,
no,
because
nor
Rishi
do I,
Sunak has done so well, and, you know, judge Conservatives as you like, but, you know, the furlough...
You've seen the story today about
£4.3
billion worth of fraud during furlough that's just going to be written off. Have you seen that story?
Well, yeah, I have, and you know what?
I must say, you're very... if I had a bridge to sell, I'd be quite tempted to send you the prospectus. I have to say, Boris Johnson was an amazing mayor, and Rishi, £4.3 billion down the Swanee Sunak has been fantastic.
Well, because, you know what, he supported the people. And, you know, there are
but
always
with the people's money.
That are fraudulent. There are always people that are going to play the system. There are always going to be people that take advantage.
We should try and catch them, shouldn't we? We should try and catch them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But, you know, the people that needed it, the people that really needed it got it. And I think that is, you know...
It was their money in the first place. I mean, it is only taxpayers' money that he can give back to taxpayers. I know you know that.
But I think it was a very good scheme, and you know, we are down the pan with the money. But
4.3 billion.
It highlights that people take advantage of the.
Listen, I'm teasing you a bit, Sarah. Thank you for taking it in good spirit.
Thank you.
That's absolutely fine. My pleasure. But I do think you're probably right. Sunak does still have a veneer of credibility. Whether it runs deep, I don't know. I don't know enough about him, and I do know that he's the only one really to get a little bit of clear blue water between him and Johnson. The rest of them were queuing up to essentially sort of debase themselves. It reminded me of Dobby the house elf, actually, at times, before Harry Potter gave him the sock hidden in the book, or gave it to Lucius Malfoy. But Sunak does seem to be the one who is keeping his powder at least dry-ish. Thank you, Sarah. 10:57 is the time. A couple of phone lines still free. Might stay with us. It's entirely up to you. Lucy's in Worcester Park. Lucy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Absolutely love your show. Thank you for taking my call.
Welcome.
I'm just calling to say that I did vote for Boris, and this was actually the first time that I voted, so I am a little bit disappointed in, obviously, the outcome. And the reason why I'm phoning is because I think an apology is just not good enough. And the reason why I say that is because with politics, and as a teacher myself, not of politics, but with politics, there's a lot of students that the conversations I hear in schools, etc., a lot of students don't really know about politics, or they've heard about them. There's also a lot of my friends as well, a lot of generations who are not really interested in politics. And I think that because politics, especially with lockdown, has come into people's houses, has really affected everybody. So everyone has to know about politics, has to follow the rules, has been following the rules. And I think everyone is let down, and it's just an anger where everyone's got their own personal...
It's not political, this, is it? That's what I've learned this morning, and you've just highlighted that. You've just articulated it very clearly. This doesn't feel like a political story. This is somehow a personal, a human story. We're looking at that human, and we're considering our own behaviour, and we're looking at those humans in Downing Street and thinking, how the hell could you do that? How could you do that?
Yeah, and it's just so personal, and I'm so disappointed with the government, and I think Boris has to go. He's got to do the right thing, and as I say, I voted for him, but I think now his time is up and he's got to go, because it's hurt too many people, that we sacrificed too much. And it's just not right.
And it's the scale of the hurt, perhaps. So all the other things in his past, I don't know how many of them you'll be aware of, but they're getting sacked from various jobs for lying and cheating on all his wives, and going to court to keep the existence of at least one of his love children secret, and all that. They didn't hurt you, it didn't hurt me. It was, that's not. I mean, we've all got skeletons in our closet, but this one feels as if it's somehow personal to everybody, personal to the whole country.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, we've never had really politics come into every single household like it has done with the lockdown. No. And everyone's got their own story, whether it's not seeing their grandparents or saying goodbye to a parent, or not being able to fly to a different country to see somebody that they know.
Big things, little things, and as you've reminded us, the real life and death things. Lucy, thank you. I look forward to your further calls to this programme. 10:59 is the time. Quite a few of you pointing out that several million people were left out in the cold under Rishi Sunak's furlough scheme. And I'm not going to be glib and say don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And you are right. The freelance army, as it were abandoned. And I remember saying at the time, I don't think he's going to leave them abandoned. He's going to tweak it. He's going to bring some of it back, or he's going to look after some of them at a later date, and to the best of my knowledge he never did. Of course, when Sarah praised Rishi Sunak, that was a caveat I should have included, and similarly quite a lot of you marvelling at the idea of being impressed by someone not introducing emission zones, but hey ho. One of the stories that is involved in what's become known, or what is apparently known as Operation Red Meat. This is the belief that however angry you are, let me actually explain to you exactly what Operation Red Meat is. It's quite important. The calculation is that however angry you are with Boris Johnson and his closest colleagues partying while you couldn't even attend funerals, or sit beside the deathbed of a beloved parent, or attend the birth of your grandchild, or meet your grandchild shortly after that birth. The calculation is that however angry you are about that, then by being particularly unpleasant towards refugees and the BBC, you will be distracted from your anger and your upset, and in many cases, as we've heard on this programme and others on LBC, your heartbreak, by what Nadine Dorries has apparently described as throwing some red meat to the back benches. So that is the calculation. If we can just be sufficiently vile about refugees and the Beeb, then you'll forget how cross you are about the parties that Boris Johnson was attending and his staff were throwing while you couldn't even give your grandmother a proper funeral. That's the calculation. Will it work? I don't know. I have spent much of the last 10 years being surprised at how effective these disgusting and cynical attempts to exploit, manipulate and ultimately persuade decent people to vote against their own interests have been. And I suspect I will spend the rest of my life continuing to be so. So, this is part of Operation Red Meat, as it's called, or perhaps Dead Horse, as it will become known. Boris Johnson will put the military in charge of stemming the number of boats crossing the Channel as part of an attempt to save his premiership. Plans are being drawn up to send migrants to countries such as Ghana and Rwanda for processing and resettlement in a move to tackle the small boats crisis. I don't know that we can get our teeth into that element of this absurd story, but we can certainly get our teeth into this bit. The Prime Minister will give the Royal Navy primacy over all government vessels in the Channel this month in one of a series of populist announcements as he faces pressure to quit over Downing Street parties. And I said to you at sort of 10 past 10 that the Murdoch angle, or perhaps the Rebecca Brooks angle, depending on whose hand is actually on the tiller at the moment, is interesting. I don't think they're going to come out cheerleading for Keir Starmer anytime soon, but the Times, and even more surprisingly perhaps the Sun, are not joining in this desperate attempt to rehabilitate Boris Johnson. That to me is interesting. I know I find newspapers more interesting than you do sometimes because of my background and my previous work, really. But that to me is quite interesting. You watch these things. Look, so listen, I know you don't like me pointing this out. If it wasn't for newspaper owners, there's no earthly way Brexit ever would have happened. So that's how significant it is. You can't pretend otherwise. And the tone with which they're discussing Boris Johnson's current travails really struck me this morning. Once I'd overcome my absolute shock at the Daily Mail's dismal descent into hilarity, I read the front page of the Times and then I double-checked the Sun. And they're not completely, but they are treating with a correct amount of nonchalance the non-story about Keir Starmer. And B, they are looking at the Boris Johnson rehabilitation attempt in a very clear-eyed fashion, particularly the Times, because of these phrases here. Part of an attempt to save his premiership. They're not describing it as a much-needed policy or as a much vaunted manifesto pledge, which of course it wouldn't be. They're describing this as a series of populist announcements as he faces pressure to quit over Downing Street parties. So that's about as close as the Times will ever come to reporting that this is a cynical and relatively desperate attempt to distract you from how angry and upset you feel about the fact that Boris Johnson and his cronies were throwing parties and breaking swings while you weren't allowed to give your nan a proper funeral. That is, in Times journalese, what I just told you a moment ago. And I am going to do it again, I'm afraid. I think in the first instant, I'm going to confine calls to the programme from people who, I was about to say from people who know what they're talking about. That's me out. Pot kettle. From people who can provide us with a bit of operational insight or professional insight. So a Rear Admiral will have the power to direct Border Force, Coast Guard and Fisheries Protection and Customs and Excise to carry out surveillance or intercept those crossing the Channel. This will be the Chief of the Defence Staff as well, Admiral Sir Anthony Radakin, is said to believe that the plans will ensure no one gets to the UK on their own terms, with migrants escorted to shore for processing in new migrant hubs. The language I find horrible, but, I appreciate that the refugee stories are very effective in politics. We never would have heard of Nigel Farage if it wasn't for the effectiveness of using refugees, using desperate people, and, of course, the occasional character who is taking advantage of his freedom to get into a leaky dinghy and hope that he might be able to cross the English Channel without drowning. Yeah, crikey, I don't see anyone signing up soon for that particular bit of business. But here we are. I just want to know what will happen. And I don't know whether you need to be in the Coast Guard or in the Navy. How many people just started singing? In the Coast Guard. I don't know whether you need to be in the Coast Guard or in the Navy or but how would this work, do you think? And I want you to talk to me from the position of having some maritime experience. So you might work on a fishing trawler, or you might be a serving member of the Royal Navy, ex-Navy, Merchant Navy, Coast Guard, Border Force. How would it work? So here I am in a dinghy with my children, having fled, let's say, Syria on pain of death. My house has been blown up. I've got nowhere to live, and Assad's stormtroopers have got me on their list because I used to have a radio show in Damascus, and I have managed to get, having sold everything I own, I've managed to get to Calais, and I've got into a dinghy, and I am trying to get to Dover because I've always been told that Britain is a shining light, a beacon of decency and freedom in this world, and I know that if I can get there, the welcome will be warm. Not least because part of the reason that I've suffered so badly back in Damascus is because of the West's failure to intervene against Assad and to allow Vladimir Putin almost a free rein during the Syrian civil war. So here I am sitting in a dinghy 4 miles off Dover. Simple question. What happens next? If the Royal Navy are in charge, what happens next? 03456060973. Because, I mean, we know that the calculation is that you're going to be successfully so riled up about the thoughts of those pesky refugees that you'll forget how cross you were about Boris Johnson and his colleagues throwing parties while you couldn't give your nan a proper funeral. But operationally, technically, in terms of detail, Priti Patel has come out with some astonishing suggestions lately. Again, I don't know whether she means it and she's crackers, or whether she doesn't mean it and she's being sinister and manipulative, but sending jet skis to sort of nudge dinghies. Did you read this one? So you'd go out on a jet ski and you'd nudge the front of the boat, the hull of the boat. You'd just nudge it in the hope of turning it around. And then the boat would turn around and go back to wherever it had come from. Also, for the record, because I don't want to hit anybody over the head with this if they ring in, we shoulder, in all measurable terms, percentages per capita, overall totals. Just pick France as an example. Much fewer. We welcome much fewer people, many fewer people than France does. So we do less. The idea that and there is absolutely no requirement under any relevant legislation for people to stop in, quotes, the first safe country that they come to. So those are, again, lies that you've been told by right-wing media. So we establish those parameters for this conversation. France already does more than we do. So there's no statistical argument, there's no syntactical argument about why it is justified to sink these boats. Although the kind of people that believe that probably don't listen to this programme. There's plenty of other places in the British media where you will be welcomed with open arms. So that argument doesn't work. This is simply an argument about refugees, asylum seekers. Let's just say asylum seekers to make it even clearer, because some of them may turn out not to qualify for asylum, in which case they won't be refugees in the technical reading of the term. So they are seekers of asylum. They are coming here in the hope of receiving asylum. They are asylum seekers. I am in the boat. I am in a dinghy in the English Channel, dans la Manche, and the Royal Navy is coming towards me. How on earth is this supposed to work? Because if it's not a deeply cynical and sinister attempt to distract you from how angry you are about Boris Johnson and his cronies throwing parties while you couldn't give your nan a proper funeral, then there will be some decent answers to the question that I'm asking. There will be meaningful and comprehensible explanations of how this will actually work. The headline is, Boris Johnson will put the military in charge of stemming the number of boats crossing the channel. Whatever your experience is, whatever your perspective is, and you need to have some experience, how would you envisage that working? Or, of course, not working? And I'll let anyone military have this. So any of the armed services, is that what you signed up for? And am I asking the wrong question? Because you do not really sign up for anything in particular. So to suggest that you are being insulted by being told to do this is just a category error on my part. You don't get to obey some orders and disobey others. You signed up to obey orders. If the orders come in, you've got to go out and repel refugees in flimsy dinghies, then that's absolutely fine. Or is it a valid question? I hope it's a valid question, but I need you to tell me if it isn't. I don't think anyone signed up for this, did they? Let's serve Queen and country. How? By rounding up desperate people in dinghies in the middle of the English Channel. So I want the physical question, what will happen in the sea? And then I want the intellectual or philosophical question, which is, you joined the Navy, you joined the Army, you joined whatever the armed service may be, or come one, come all welcome. How do you feel about the fact that you or your comrades are going to apparently be told to do this? Phone lines are wide open. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And please join in on this, because I don't know quite what to make of it. I guess, in a way, it's possible someone might answer the question in a way that makes it sound like quite a good idea, or at least a plausible idea, or a feasible idea. Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll have to conclude that it is just an attempt to distract you from your anger at the fact that Boris Johnson and his cronies were throwing parties while you couldn't give your nan a proper funeral. I think we're pretty clear on what the reasoning is, or what the calculation is behind this, and it's worked in the past. Treat you as if you are completely stupid and cruel, and succeed politically as a result. I hope it doesn't. But if it does, and Boris Johnson puts the military in charge of stemming the number of boats crossing the Channel, how would that actually work? 03456060973. And how would you feel as a member of the military, past or present, about being, if you like, required to undertake these sort of duties? John's in Billericay. John, what do you reckon?
Well, I mean, I spent 5 years in the Royal Navy. I spent 2 years volunteering on the lifeboats on a coastal station.
Yeah.
In answer to your question, I mean, I just cannot see how the Royal Navy is going to stop these dinghies from coming over across the Channel, because I'm pretty sure no captain in their right mind is going to position their vessel in a situation where they're going to be nudging these dinghies back towards France, or, kind of doing a blockade so they can't get through, because you physically just wouldn't be able to stop them. So I was listening to you talk about it, and I thought, actually, no, you're right. I think this is just one of these stories that's been put out there to detract about, from what everybody was talking about last week about Boris Johnson and his Downing Street parties. I just can't see how they're going to do it. How they're going to be able to use the Royal Navy to stop dinghies crossing the Channel when there's, tens of them coming across every day.
Well, also, I mean, they're tiny. And I'm just looking at a photograph of one that was taken from a P&O cruiser in October. And I mean, how would it work even if they were going to have a crack at it? Because you couldn't direct a big boat at a tiny dinghy. So they'd have to lower a boat from a big boat. Forgive me if I'm using the incorrect terminology, John. This is your field of expertise, not mine. But how would they do it? How would it happen?
There's only two ways you could really physically do it. The first way is to use the patrol vessel or the warship to stop the dinghy from coming any closer to UK waters. But a dinghy with an outboard is far more manoeuvrable than a warship, even the smaller patrol boats. Or, as you say, the Navy ship could launch a rigid inflatable into the water to try and convince the person that is kind of steering the dinghy to go the other way. But then, they're not going to go the other way. Let's face it, if they kind of risked travelling 20 nautical miles across the Channel to get to UK waters, they're not all of a sudden going to see a Royal Navy ship and turn around. In fact, the thing that it could risk doing is the individuals in the dinghy could think, well, look, let's jump in the water, because the Royal Navy's not going to stand by and let people drown in front of them. They're just not going to, they just won't do it. So that's why I just can't see it working.
And I mean, you lead me into a really ugly place, but we have to go there because this is where we've been led by the politics of it, is that this might appeal to people who, and I could probably find it in my inbox now if I looked, this might appeal to people who quite like the idea of these asylum seekers drowning. But I can't believe there's many of them, or enough of them, to achieve a political result on this.
Do you know what? I think it would, but what I would say to you is that, like I say, for someone who's been in the RNLI, been in the Royal Navy, spent 5 years, it's all very well kind of, sitting in a landlocked house thinking, yes, I want these people to end up in the water. But when you're actually out on the water and you see the...
Oh, I just lost the phone line. We need to get John back because I want to know what he was going to say next. Can we sort that out? And we'll come back to John at the first opportunity. Loz is in Nottingham. Loz, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello,
Hi,
mate.
it's the first time I've ever phoned your station.
Better late than never, Loz. Better late
Absolutely.
than never.
I listen all the time. But I felt compelled to ring about this issue. I'm ex-Royal Navy. I was in the Royal Navy for many, many years. And the thought that this government are going to use them to deflect from Partygate, various other scandals that is engulfing Boris Johnson, is making me feel sick. God. First and foremost, James, we would not leave migrants to drown in the sea. We would not storm migrant boats. The Royal Navy is a compassionate service.
Yes.
And I've done rescue missions all over the world, rescuing migrants, refugees from conflicts, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And the first job of the Navy is to preserve life.
There it is.
And this despicable government are using populist policies, shall we say, to deflect from what they are doing to the country. Is actually made me feel physically sick this morning, because I know sailors now that are. In fact, I've had 2 or 3 messages this morning from colleagues, comrades, who are absolutely disgusted that Boris Johnson and Patel and the rest of them could even consider using the Navy to play to a sick base that perhaps will support this.
Yes. I hadn't thought of it this way round. Obviously, I must have been thinking about it implicitly, to use a popular word at the moment, by asking the question. But the line, and you may or may not disagree with this, but the accusation that he soils everything he touches, and it's usually individuals, and then it becomes an institution, and then perhaps it becomes an entire government. He's in a sense, I think, listening to you, I'm thinking that he's soiling the Royal Navy with this suggestion.
Well, absolutely. And the messages I've had from friends this morning who served with me, they don't want no part of this. I know serving sailors who will want no part of this. It's not the job of the Royal Navy to go kicking migrants and refugees.
Is there any way that it could be... Can you see any way in which it might be feasible and not as unpleasant as you currently...
Well,
operationally, tactically, John was pretty clear.
Yes.
That he couldn't imagine how it would work anyway, operationally.
Well, it can't. It can't work. I mean, I don't know, a frigate going alongside as a small paddling pool with 20 migrants in it and threatening them.
And flimsy enough already.
Absolutely,
as well, of course, in the first instance.
We'd go alongside a migrant boat, James, and rescue them. And then we may hand them to the RNLI.
Sure. And that somehow makes me proud, as you describe that. That's kind of what I thought being British was about.
I mean, I've been in conflicts with the Royal Navy, and yes, we're a military service, and I get that, and we have a job to do in wartime, but we're in peacetime, and I know for a fact that my colleagues will stand up to this government and say, "Get stuffed."
Well, you heard it here first.
We are here to help people, not to do your bidding because you're unpopular at the moment.
And it is that clear, isn't it? I think the more you talk about it. Loz, I thank you. And your anger actually has moved me. I have to be honest with you. You know, this is my job. I do it every day. But I hadn't quite clocked, and I apologise to you and to John, who we'll go back to now. I hadn't quite clocked what this means to your sense of self and your sense of duty. John, we just got to the bit where you were describing what it's like to be actually out on the water and to be confronted with someone in distress or in a dinghy, as opposed to sitting in the comfort of a warm studio or an armchair and speculating about what it might be like.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying that, you know, when you're faced with a situation where you've got somebody in front of you who is struggling to stay above the waves, then every fibre in your body, if you're a decent human being, will say to you, I need to get that person out of the water. Yeah. And this is why I just don't understand how Boris Johnson expects the Royal Navy. When you joined, I joined the Royal Navy because I wanted to see the world. And because I wanted to protect.
That's a familiar. That was the slogan, wasn't it? Or was that?
I know. They must have got it from me. Actually, I should have copyrighted it. But
it should be on commission.
You join because you want to travel. You don't join because you want to station yourself in the English Channel. So you can put your hand up and say to people on dinghies, turn around, go back. Yeah, that's not what you sign up for. I feel sorry for my former colleagues in the Royal Navy who will be put in a situation if it does happen when they have to go out there and try and fend the dinghies off, because it's like I say, I served on three warships. I've never met anyone that would have signed up to do that kind of task. So I just don't see. Is it
insulting? Because Loz made it feel insulting to me. It's insulting to seamen. It's insulting to sailors.
Yeah, as a professional sailor in the Royal Navy, I can't imagine anybody getting their daily orders coming through and it says, look, we're going to be on task in the English Channel now to try and sort of fend off migrants in dinghies. I can imagine all the lads and lasses in the messes kind of looking at each other saying, "What is this? What we're doing? We got a multi-million-pound warship with anti-submarine and anti-air warfare capability, and what you want us to sit in English Channel and sort of act as a visual deterrent for people on dinghies? I just can't see how that's going to work."
No, well, I mean, that maybe it's not intended to work. It is just intended to provide a couple. You almost have to hope that it's just a desperate, cynical and profoundly unpleasant distraction tactic rather than a potential Policy. Thank you, John. Thank you, Loz. A lot of love coming in for both of you, I should add. I still make myself chuckle. It's quite... it's just the idea that someone looks at the last fortnight of British politics and sticks on the front page that Keir Starmer is under pressure to apologise. It's quite incredible. But anyway, we're looking at a different front page today. This is the headline that will no doubt please some people. People who claim to be supporters of our armed forces. Hey, and look, maybe there's a member of the Royal Navy or a former member of the Royal Navy listening who loves the idea of being sent out to somehow repel or deal with. It's a bit short on detail, this story, but that's the nature of populist red meat. You know that things have come to a pretty pass where they even call it red meat. You know, I mean, I've used that as a phrase to describe policies that are designed to appease the furiously hard of thinking. Just throw them some red meat. Never mind about the facts. Here's some offal. Actually, offal's not usually red. But it comes from animals that are usually described... No, let's not go down that particular syntactical cul-de-sac. I mean, they're even calling it Operation Red Meat, reportedly. So they're not even pretending anymore. What can we come up with that is largely meaningless, but very provocative? Oh, let's send the army to, insert verb of choice, migrants or asylum seekers. As they all are, up until the point their application is either accepted or rejected. A lot of love. Sounds like Cilla Black then. A lot of love coming in for Loz and John. And I'm not surprised, actually. I got a bit... Lino describes himself as getting a bit wobbly at the end of Loz's call. And you're right. I meant it. I don't say that very often. This is the kind of thing that I thought being British was all about. You know, actually... having a role on the world stage that involves helping the less fortunate, the bruised, the damaged, the desperate. But no, not under Boris Johnson. Under Boris Johnson, the job of the Royal Navy will be to stem the number of boats crossing the Channel. And the calculation is, this will distract you from how angry you are about the fact that he was attending parties in his garden and elsewhere while you were unable to give your nan a proper funeral. Roger's in Hull. Roger, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello, Roger.
I was 44 years in the Merchant Navy, and 30 years of that in command, and worked a lot in the English Channel, from Shoreham, Southampton, or Fawley, the Thames, across to the European refineries and the like. And the Channel's busy enough without a load of Royal Navy craft and Coast Guard craft and Royal Marine craft zipping here and there. I'm just thinking about the present days where it's thick fog at the moment. It'd be horrendous, but no matter what, the duty of every captain, every seafarer, Royal Navy, Merchant Navy, whatever, is to preserve life at sea. And no captain, no matter how experienced, could manoeuvre his ship alongside a dinghy. Absolutely impossible. And I speak as someone who has a pilot's licence for many British ports.
Gosh. Just to explain to people what that means. I oddly enough, I know what a pilot does because I was reading about it a couple of weeks ago. But that because in the context of manoeuvrability, your pilot's licence is particularly pertinent.
Yeah, also a lot of all British ports and all ports around the world, they have experienced local seafarers with the knowledge, experience and certification to guide and manoeuvre ships in and out of their ports.
So you'll be a couple of miles off shore and then the pilot will be brought to your ship to bring it in and steer it.
That's right. Yes. In a lot of cases, yes, but in a lot of British ports, I've actually passed the examinations to have what they call a pilot exemption. So I know the place well enough not to require a pilot and do my own manoeuvring. And
no, I don't doubt it for a minute. You could, and you're obviously a very modest man, but you're up there with people that could park a ship on a postage stamp, and there's no earthly way that you could park a ship. Is obviously not the correct terminology, Roger. I apologise.
The chances are you'd probably do more damage to the people in the dinghy if you try to do it. So you either launch a lifeboat or you try and give shelter, depending on what the weather's doing.
Are we missing something? Is there any way here? Because, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised when I describe myself as not being a fan of Boris Johnson. And obviously the military is designed to evoke a certain emotional reaction in a certain type of MP, really, as much as voter. But is there any way that big ships could be used to deter small boats?
No, not without intentional contact with a small dinghy, which would result in people in the water.
And that would be in contravention of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
International regulations.
Yeah. Because you have an obligation to rescue anyone in danger at sea. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing, because you derive comfort from the knowledge that other seafarers are subscribing to the same system, don't you?
I think everybody will. There was an old phrase: if you're a captain of a ship, you were the master next to God. So there was no higher authority on a ship than the captain. The very thought of causing, no matter what your political views are about immigration and illegal immigration and asylum seekers, which they are, no matter what your opinions are, you still have a duty to preserve life at sea. And there's no negotiation on that. And I can't imagine any captain putting his own ship or the lives of people in a small boat in any danger. I've tried to undertake a small rescue at sea, and it's very, very, very difficult off the Isle of Wight one day, years ago.
Gosh.
Very, very, very difficult. A couple of people in a very expensive speedboat lost their engines, and the Coast Guard, we were the nearest. They asked us to go and attend and try and help, and to get my ship alongside. Well, we couldn't. We got as close as we could, then threw them a rope and hauled them in, and we used our ship's cranes to haul their speedboat on board and took them to Poole.
Blimey.
And they were very grateful.
I bet they were.
Night, even though it was summertime. The water's still very cold in summer.
Well, and also, a fancy speedboat would be a lot sturdier than the kind of vessels that we're talking about here, wouldn't we?
And of course, if and the owner of the speedboat would have had some maritime experience. These people have no. They're showing the lights of Dover probably at night time, or they're pointed in the right direction. But then the wind can change dramatically in space of 24 miles across. And where are all these patrol boats going to go? Are they going to patrol up and down the sea lanes at 11 miles exactly between the French coast and the British coast?
It's a grim.
In danger of collision, and then the fog comes down, and nobody knows what they're doing anyway. It's absolute pandemonium.
Well, I guess the only consolation we can draw from this is there's probably no intention at all to try to implement what they're announcing. It's designed solely as an exercise in provocation and rhetoric.
It's salesmanship. He's just trying to sell himself after the back. I've got. You asked earlier on about. People voting Conservative in the 2019 election, and I tried to get through then, but couldn't. And I was driving, so I couldn't pull over and wait a while. But I am now. I'm sat in my car.
Good man.
Normally, I'm laughing at your programmes. Or not laughing at your programmes.
So say laughing at you, not with you. You sound like one of my school reports. You sound like one of my school reports, Roger.
Chuckling along with you.
That's better. Thank you.
And I've listened for years. Never made a phone call. I prefer to listen to other people's conversations.
Of course.
But I felt quietly incensed about this one.
Clearly.
But I voted Conservative all my life. I was at 10. I was a young Briton. At 11, 12, 13, 14. I was a young Conservative. I've working class roots definitely, but I chose to be that way.
Sure.
When Terry McNamara became the MP for East Hull, North Hull, followed by Diana Johnson, I didn't vote for him. I voted for the opposite, but I will never, ever, ever vote Conservative again. The sleaze and the corruption, it makes me feel ashamed to be where I am and what I am.
Well, don't let them pollute you. Because you answer only to yourself for what you've done in the past and who you are and what you are. And I can tell you for a fact that everybody listening to this will be proud to have had you flying under our flag and doing what you've done. And you've explained it so perfectly, so beautifully, that I really can't conclude other than that this is never designed to actually float, if you pardon the pun, and is designed solely. That's what red meat is. This is the bit I couldn't get past. Roger, thank you, mate. And you say you normally prefer listening to other people. I can assure you you'll be very squarely in the category of people that other people have really enjoyed listening to today. But usually red meat doesn't have to be substantive, does it? That's the whole point. I'll throw them some red meat rather than something constructive. Red meat just gets devoured. You don't build anything with red meat. You don't fix anything with red meat. You just temporarily... I mean, only Nadine Dorries could have come up with this as a, quotes, good idea. The whole point of red meat as a figure of speech is it temporarily sates the slathering jaws of rabid feral animals. So the whole policy platform here is designed to throw red meat to Conservative backbenchers in the hope that they'll spend 10 minutes chomping on it and forget to stay cross with Boris Johnson for throwing all these parties while their constituents couldn't even give their own mothers a proper funeral. That's the calculation. Will it work? I don't know. We live in a country where the Daily Mail can, for 2 days running, actually, if you go from Saturday to Monday, run a story, an 8-month-old non-story about Keir Starmer not breaking any rules. The more you look into that, the more the technical detail of the story makes it clear that no rules were broken. But hey-ho, doesn't matter. Doff cap, tug forelock. After 2 weeks of scandal emerging from 10 Downing Street, Sir Keir Starmer was last night facing pressure to apologise. Oh dear. And if that doesn't work, well, let's send the army in to those dinghies in the sea. Unbelievable. Speaking of dinghies in the sea, I tell you what, I'd love to be in the room when Novak Djokovic, who's now been deported from Australia after losing his appeal against the cancellation of his visa, he catches up with his family and he says to his brother or his dad, he says, so what did you do? What was the plan? And they say, well, we signed up this great English politician to help. And Novak Djokovic will be, oh, excellent, thanks, lads. Who did you sign up? Oh, he's been over, Novak. He's been over to the house. We showed him the trophy room. He brought a little camera with him, filmed himself doing speeches and all sorts of things. He really thought he'd be able to help you stay in Australia. And I say, who did you get then, Dad? Who was the English politician that you got to come and help me fight against Australia's immigration rules? And his dad will say, there's a chap called Nigel Farage. And then Novak will Google it. I'd love to be there for that bit of the story. Claire's in the Cotswold to steer us back to this actually perhaps even grimmer than I realised story about Boris Johnson suggesting that the military will be deployed to repel or deal with dinghies full of asylum seekers in the English Channel. What would you like to say, Claire?
Hi, James.
Hello,
this is the first time that I've been moved to phone into any programme, quite frankly.
Well, thank you.
But I was immediately on the line because I'm actually feeling quite angry at the moment.
Yes.
And I'm also really feeling for my Royal Naval colleagues. So I was in the Air Force for 23 years and got to a relatively senior rank. And I'm just thinking of my RN colleagues that are now trying to work out what to do with this. I mean, there's a couple of really practical questions. So what does success look like? What does mission success look like? There's also things that what else are they being redeployed from to do this? I mean, with this current situation in the Ukraine, you know, there's a lot of other taskings that they might have to be being redeployed from. So what does success look like? What's the cost? Who's paying for this? And what gives? What other taskings aren't going to be done?
Yeah.
In quite a febrile international atmosphere. But the thing, so that's really practical. But the thing I really wanted to phone about, and the thing that came to the forefront of my mind, is during our time in the military, we go on training alongside my RN colleagues.
Yes.
And one of the most important visits I ever attended was visiting Auschwitz. And the reason why we all went to visit Auschwitz was to reflect on the banality of evil and what you would do if you were faced with a situation in which you were being given orders to follow and you morally knew they were wrong or morally did not agree with them.
Gosh.
And it was a really reflective time for all of us. You reflect, okay, put yourself in this situation, stand in the gas chambers and think, okay, would I have gone along with this or would I have stood up and been counted? I know that's a rather extreme example.
And no one's suggesting, and I know you're not, that the RN would be required to sort of exterminate refugees. Although the policy might be designed to appeal to people who would quite like to see that happening.
But it's more that what would you do if you were put in a position where you didn't agree with what you were being asked to do?
Yes.
And that's really quite powerful. I always thought, well, this will never apply in the UK. We'll never ever even get close to this situation. Never. You know, this is more applicable to other militaries, other countries.
Yeah.
So that for me is really powerful. Like I said, it's not as extreme as an example.
No.
But I'm sure.
But it's the same
people
philosophical
will be
dilemma.
reflecting-
It's
yeah, it's
just a much higher stakes.
What would you do if you were being asked to do something that you thought you were being misused?
But don't we rely? You've taken me down a rabbit hole now, which I thank you for, because it's proper food for thought. But surely, up to a point, the military relies upon you leaving your personal positions or feelings at the door.
Absolutely, and that was the power of having that moment, period
exactly.
that allowed us to reflect on it. At what point do you go, well, actually, this doesn't feel quite right? And what personally would you do if you were faced with that situation?
Wow. How much trouble would you get into? Because Loz was fairly, and I see Loz has popped up on Twitter, where he quite rightly is receiving a lot of applause for the contribution he made. But you can't really turn around when you're on duty and say, I'm not doing that, can you?
And that's the thing. I'm retired now, so I have the power to be able to speak out in a way that, my serving colleagues would quite rightly not wade into a political debate. They would just get on with their orders. So they're they won't have the same freedom as I do, because I've left the military, to be able to
speak truth to power. I mean, it's grim, this, because he's doing what he always does, and whether he's thought it through or not, or whether Nadine Dorries dreamt it up, or whether there's no real plan to do anything, they're just hoping to shut the backbenches up for 10 minutes. He's insulted members of the Royal Navy.
I mean, I hope. I mean, my last course was for senior members of the military, and the entire course is about truth to power, speaking truth to power. Yeah. And I sincerely hope that my Royal Naval colleagues are behind the scenes, because of course they won't do it publicly, speaking truth to power and asking those searching questions about what's the mission success, what are you asking us to do, for how long, how much, and questioning the legality of it. And I'm sure they are, but of course you won't hear that.
We will never know.
Show.
We can just wish them well. You can just, and if you were ever to hear it on a phone-in show, Claire, it would be this phone-in show, as you've helped prove by making it the first one that you've rung into. Thank you, but no, you just have to hope that they will get on with the business of quietly explaining to politicians why the proud history and traditions of the Royal Navy will not be soiled and polluted by this desperate politicking. And they call themselves the Patriots. That's what always makes me chuckle in a wry way. They're the patriotic ones, wrapped in flags, sending out brave men and women in our Royal Navy to enact unspecified tactics upon asylum seekers in flimsy dinghies. Claire, thank you so much. And to Fareham next, where Chris is. I've only got 2 minutes left, Chris. What would you like to say?
Hi, James. First time caller. Yeah, I'll try and be quick. It's pretty much all been said, really. Yes, you join the military and you do as you're told. So, there is, big weight behind that. And that's probably a little bit of reliance that politicians are sort of using. But I've never known a captain or anybody down through the chain of command, even to the guys that will be going out in the rigid inflatable boats, the ribs, that weren't compassionate to other seafarers. And it doesn't matter what they've done. It doesn't matter why you're seeing them in the sea. If their lives are going to be put in danger, you don't leave them.
Well, it's a classic philosophical bind, isn't it? Because you rely upon that knowledge when you're at sea yourself. It's like a brotherhood, an international brotherhood of seafarers.
Completely. I mean, it's I'm sure there is a written rule, but it's
there is actually. I've just been sent it. There is a written.
I'm sure it's an unwritten rule, but a written rule, but it's an unwritten rule that you just do not abandon people. And I saw it in the mid-90s with Haitian refugees. We were patrolling in the Caribbean Sea. In the Caribbean on patrol, anti-drugs patrols.
Yeah.
Guys coming from, all kinds of places, South America and through the Caribbean, taking millions of pounds worth of very, very harmful substances, all to be trafficked to the United States or the UK. We had guns trained on them. We had snipers in helicopters. Yeah. Ultimately, they ditch the drugs over the side, but you don't then just leave them to fend for themselves. that's just not going to happen. So it seems to me that this is politics. I'd imagine the chains of command are incredibly nervous about boats. I mean, can you
and
imagine
being brought
boats?
into this, I mean, they'll reach for anything, won't they? I mean, the more desperate you are, it's like a pub fight, and someone will pick up an ashtray and try and smash you over the head with that. The more desperate they are, the more they'll reach for absolutely anything. And on this occasion,
boats with long lenses. Boats with long lenses in the channel.
Yeah.
Daily Mail photographers trying to take a photograph. They're hoping they will see somebody from the Royal Navy with anti-flash on and a big 20mm or 30mm cannon,
I think you're right.
trained on a little boat. But that won't be it, because in the Navy you're compassionate and you don't mistreat other seafarers regardless of why they're there.
That's beautifully put, and very much of a piece with all the calls this hour. And it's an hour which sometimes you never know where it's going to come from, but it's an hour that I have been really quite moved by in the most beautiful of ways, just to hear from so many people who have dedicated their lives to keeping people safe at sea. So, thank you.